So white couldn't find anything decisive after e5, and it had to look for different options. And I guess it was quite obvious that the next move that white came up with was f5. It's also pretty logical. Instead of trying to sacrifice one of its light pieces on e6, white wants to weaken this square and to keep some solid position in the center. And also it prepares the opening of f-file, and most likely white will have a chance to, after castling, to use its rook. So the move, it's multifunctional, and although it doesn't look as straightforward as e5, it carries more poison, and it proved to be far more dangerous for black. It took more players than one Fischer to prove that black's position had enough defensive resources. So naturally, black tries to ease the tension in the center and to remove one of the pieces that attacks this square on e6. It plays knight c6, and after f takes e6, f takes e6, knight c6, b takes e6, we will reach another critical position. So black, at first sight, black solved the problems because it's improved its position, is no longer so badly behind in development, and it just has two more moves: bishop e7, and then castle short, and there will be no more problems. But in real life, things are not simple, and white's first attempt was to have a breakthrough in the center, and also to use the fact that bishop on c8 is very, very passive. It's difficult to develop. And also, if white knight could appear on e4, then, as we already discussed in the previous segment, black queen on a3 will not be well placed and will be cut from the main battleground. So white tried e5. Now black is facing a dilemma: to take on e5, most natural, or to play knight d5. Both moves were tried in 60s when the line was first introduced, and many great players took different sides to prove whether white was winning or black could refute white's audacious attack in such an early opening stage. D takes e5 proved to be the best move. But also we have to mention knight d5. It was played in one of the Fischer's games. But wait a second. In that game, Fischer was white. And it was Efim Geller who challenged Fischer to a knight's battle in his favorite variation, in the territory that everybody conceded to Fischer. And Fischer was white. Of course, he couldn't reject such a challenge. Those were good old days, where to reject a challenge would be considered not only a sign of weakness, but probably of moral defeat. And in Monte Carlo 1967, Fischer wanted to crush Geller in his favorite line. He played e5, but after knight d5, it didn't work out exactly for Fischer. He took on d5, cd5, bishop e2, d5, castle, bishop c5, king h1, rook f8. He made all the right moves: c4, rook f1, bishop b7. And here Fischer made a mistake. He played bishop g4, and after brilliant remark d takes c4, bishop takes e6, queen d3, he discovered that white's attack has evaporated, and two black pawns are still there, extra pawns, and he lost game in few moves. Also, he had probably better chances to complicate the situation. But a bit later, the same year, Mikhail Tal, who really learned from Fischer's mistake, played against Bogdanovich queen c2 and won very quickly. So you can look at all these games. There are plenty of analysis. This line was extremely popular. Probably we had less games played than tons of variations presented in chess magazines throughout the world, not only in Russian press but also in publications in America and in Europe. So knight d5 was actually pushed from the front line. There were some attempts to revive this line by playing rook a7 here and then avoiding bishop c5 check, trying to keep this square c5 for the queen. But these attempts didn't work, and White found quite convincing ways of breaking through Black's defense. So Black had to take on e5, and that's the best move. D takes e5, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, knight e4. Again, at first sight, it didn't look very dangerous for Black, because White sacrificed 2 pawns, but these threats are not so obvious. Why not to play simply bishop e7 and after bishop e2 castle? So it was played, and even one of the victims of this illusion was Viktor Korchner, because after rook b3, White rook is not only pushing Black queen out of the main battleground, but it also comes to g3, to the decisive attack against opponent's king. So castle short was proven to be a decisive mistake, and Black eventually switched to h5. And now White had to make some tough choices, because if we place, the most natural move, castle, and after f5, it has to consider some sacrifices, because it should keep the knight on e4, and there were games played: rook b3, queen a4, c4, f takes e4. The first big game was, a Fischer's game. Kavalek, Fischer, knight in 65. Fischer survived the game, and then White had numerous attempts to win this position, trying to exploit this terrible situation of the Black king in the center that is cut from both d file and f file. But extra piece is an extra piece. It didn't work out. White couldn't make more than a draw. And then there were few new attempts appeared at the stage in 70s, and it was all generated from a town of Riga. It was not only a town where Aaron Nimzovich and Mikhail Tal were born, it was also a place, it's a very lively place where the chess life in the Soviet Union was stirring. And we know many names, and one of them was Alois Vitolinch, a restless analyst who was trying to find great sacrifices, and of course this line was one of his favorites. And the players from Latvia, they won quite a few remarkable games in the line that was analyzed by Vitolinch: rook b3, queen a4, and now knight takes f6 check, bishop f6 c4. So it looks absolutely hilarious. White just takes on f6, giving up a piece with no virtual compensation. But if we just recognize that after f5, knight on e4 had to be sacrificed anyway, so it makes a lot of sense. So if we sacrifice a piece, we do it in a more convenient situation when the pawn is not on e4. So eventually it gives chance for White queen to go on d3 and then attack Black king from g6. I don't want to overload your memory with all the lines that were tested in this position. Once I also tried it with White against Rashkovsky. It was quite a lively game, but it ended up a draw. I'd rather recommend you to download your computers with number of games that could be taken out of the databases, and one of the most dangerous players with white pieces in this position was Alexander Belavsky, who played this position 6 times from 79 to 81 with phenomenal success. In fact, he won the tournament in Tilburg by beating both Robert Hübner and Jan Timman, who two of them tried to prove that white attack was not sufficient. So just look at these 6 games, and you can add more games from more recent tournaments. But it did occur that black eventually found ways to neutralize white's attack. And that's why this line is no longer considered to be the most dangerous. Just again, before we switch, I want you to look at this position again. It's an extra piece, an extra pawn, and no immediate threats. But that's what we should learn about modern chess. White actually bets on the fact that its pieces will be developed and the threats will come out, because black had a great difficulty in developing its pieces. And the queen, black queen, is cut. It stays on a4 and it cannot help its king even if it's begging for support. I can even hear that some of